This is a whole scam because these liars, these little freaks, the central banksters were BSing us for how many years? No, this is criminal what's going on in America. It's a crime right in front of our eyes.
Capitalism's in serious trouble.
Yeah, what are some of the predictions that you see coming true?
2020, I predict, will be the hottest year in world history.
2022.
2022, right.
Yeah. Everything Marx was writing about was coming true back then.
1848.
Yeah, but you see it really coming true today.
But Marx says the problem with capitalism, it leaves the bottom half poor. So you could be what he called middle class in capitalism in America, but capitalism will ultimately push you down into poverty. My prediction is my generation, who are affluent today, will be in poverty in 10 years.
Yeah, and I think I'd take it a step further because I think it's not just your generation, but it's American society, yes. Because now our economy is completely dependent yes. upon the asset prices or the yes. assets that are in the 401k.
Yes.
So if the 401k crashes as a result of assets, that means the entire economy crashes, and that goes back to what Marx is saying.
He writes about how capitalism screws employees. He talks about how doctors and lawyers will no longer be exalted. This is in 1848. So for those who read Rich Dad, Poor Dad or the Cash Flow Quadrant, these were the employees. They're always afraid they're going to lose their job. So the smart guys were the S's, doctors, lawyers, accountants, and all this. And he says this in 1848, the capitalism was going to screw the S's.
Right.
And we screwed them via taxes.
Yeah, but I would argue that it wasn't free market capitalism that
Correct.
did that. It was the Fed, it was the central planners, ironically,
Amen.
that brought his predictions to fruition. He thought it would be the capitalists, where it was actually the central planners, if you
Correct.
really
Who
get
are
into
Marxists.
the nitty-gritty. Who are Marxists. There you go.
It was actually Stalin and Lenin who said the Federal Reserve Bank is a Marxist organization. But everybody thinks the Fed is federal. It's not. It's a cartel.
Yeah. Yeah, and what it does is it, through quantitative easing, through artificially low interest rates, and through bailing out these huge corporations,
Correct.
It takes capitalism and it completely perverts it. It distorts it. And that's why I always use the term free market capitalism.
That's why the Fed is the third central bank, but it's not really a central bank. It's a Marxist organization.
Yeah, and I would say it's not just communism, but it's kind of this blend of corporatism. And so when I hear the word corporatism, the first thing that comes to my mind is what we saw in 2020, and especially with the lockdowns.
You got it.
Right? Because we basically told small and mid-sized businesses that you're no longer open for business.
Exactly.
You can't do, you're bust, basically.
That's exactly what he's saying in this book.
Yeah, so that consolidates all of the demand to these huge mega corporations.
Correct.
So then is it easier, if you're someone, let's just say that's a Marxist, that's trying to control the means of production, is it easier to control the means of production when all goods and services are produced by 100 mega corporations or millions and millions and millions of small businesses?
Correct.
Obviously, those 100 mega corporations. So that would lead one to ask the question, well, was what we saw in 2020
the start of communism?
That's right. That's right.
Stage one was socialism.
Mm-hmm.
You see, they couldn't accept communism at first. So what Marx says, we have to put in socialism as stage one. So that was Social Security. Everybody's now on Medicare, welfare, and all that. We're now a welfare nation.
Yeah.
So stage one, which is socialism, completed. Sometime in the future, communism is going to step in. And communism is opposite of socialism, because what happens is when communists take over from socialists, they murder the socialists. If you look at history, every time communists took over, the first people they kill are the intellectuals.
Yeah.
And that's about to start. So stage one would be socialism, which we had in 1933. FDR puts us on Social Security, we got welfare, Obamacare, and we have so many Americans without that government stimmy check. We're finished.
Yeah.
Then they said stage two would kick in. So in 2020, I'm not a Republican or Democrat. The communists took over in 2020.
That really means is we have a reduction in global economic activity. So, and this makes sense because you see what's happening in Austria where they're going into lockdown again. You see what's happening in Germany with these mandates. You see what's happening in Australia where they're literally putting people in quarantine camps. And you say, okay, well, is that going to produce less stuff in the future or more stuff? Obviously less stuff. So this euro-dollar market is saying, hey guys, wake up.
Yeah.
These draconian measures
not working.
Not only are they not well, they're working if you want to reduce economic activity, but they will most likely see them into the future, and this is going to crush the global economy, and it's going to make the global economy go into a recession, which makes everyone go into the arms of that person, that dictator that's riding in on the white horse, who is a central planner, who is a Marxist that says, I can solve all of your problems.
And so the world economy is coming apart, and if that crashes the stock market, that's the pensions.
Yeah, right. We all are in this crazy position where either you lose a tremendous amount of purchasing power by the 401ks crashing, or you lose a tremendous amount of purchasing power by the prices of the stuff that the average American buys daily going up by 10, 15, maybe even 20% per year.
It is so screwed up, I can't believe it.
And what was one of Stalin's main tactics? It was to create divisiveness.
Yes.
You pin people up against each other, and then they ignore who's really pulling the strings.
Correct.
And then you can basically do whatever you want. We talked about that experiment with the rats in the cage.
Yeah.
So basically, if you've got one rat in a cage and you've got the scientist out there that's shocking the rat, if it's in a cage by itself, it'll just kind of, huddle up into a ball and it won't really do anything. But if you put two rats in the same cage, and if you shock them, then they'll think it's one another. And they will start to fight, and they'll actually fight to the death, because they don't know that it's that guy out there in the white lab coat. And so it's kind of this I forgot what the exact experiment was called, but we can see that playing out right now in the United States, where the media and the central planners and the social media especially is trying to make us even more and more divisive. And then we, the average Joe, look around and we aren't sophisticated enough or to have the education to understand all of these things at play, like that's going to be in your book here. And so we look at everyone else out there and we say, oh, it must be that person that's wearing a mask, or, oh, it must be that person that's not wearing a mask. And then we start to really fight, or it must be this Rittenhouse character, or it must be the people
Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, or whomever you don't like, right? Whatever side of the aisle you're on. And then it just leads to more and more and more fighting. And then when you combine that with the three things that have historically made people go get the pitchforks and the torches, and I'm talking about food prices going up, energy prices going up, and shelter going up. That creates this powder keg that can only lead to more and more social unrest.
Amen. I couldn't believe Biden saying, we're going to raise another $10 trillion, but it won't cost us anything.
Yeah.
I mean, how stupid do you have to be?
Yeah.
How stupid do you have to be where you get this guy Biden stands up there and he says, we're going to spend another $10 trillion. I'll tell you how much a trillion is. If you spent $1 a minute, it would take you 32,000 years to spend $1 trillion.
Yeah.
It takes them a minute to print $1 trillion.
The people in politics are the dumbest pieces of arrogant crap you could find. Look at a guy who's playing president. The guy's been sucking off the public tit his whole life. Oh, this guy up in New Hampshire, after 50 years, he just retired. 50 years? These are the dumbest, arrogant, pathological, lying sociopaths and psychopaths created among the human race.
If you're a capitalist, you had too much power.
Yeah, right.
So he went to take you down. He took you down by taking away your property. It's not abolition of all property. It's abolition of rich guys' property. And that's what these guys are doing.
You're talking about taking away private property. And when you were mentioning that, I was thinking that our first form of private property is our own body.
Yeah.
So we're living in a day and age where the government that's in charge right now in the United States is trying to mandate that you do things with your private property, your body, that you might not want to do.
Correct.
So when you see that on the news, when you see those headlines, do you look at that through the terms of Marx and the studying that you've been doing for Capitalist Manifesto?
A mandate means no freedom, and that's totalitarianism.
Yeah.
That's what's frightening to me.
Yeah, they're trying to, in my opinion, they're trying to take away the ultimate private property.
Correct.
Because if you can control that, then you can pretty much make an excuse
How about this?
to take away your house, to take away your 401k.
How about take away your brain?
Yeah, to take away your mind. Yeah, I think that's one of the many things that should make people wake up. Something doesn't seem right. You know, I'm being forced to do all of these things, taking away the private property. I'm being forced to use particular words. Go back throughout history and look at the groups that have been in favor of censorship. Because right now we've got a lot of groups in the United States that are in favor of censorship. Misinformation, we need to get rid of that on social media. And look throughout history, and how many times have they been the good guys? 0 times. 100% of the time, they have been the bad guys. So why should we expect that the people that are in favor of censorship today are somehow not the bad guys? The U.S. is becoming more and more divided and just kind of more insane by the day. And whenever I try to take it to its logical conclusion, unfortunately, I always come to one answer, and I don't like that answer, but it's war. We're at the end of a fourth turning. Every other fourth turning in American history has ended in war. Does that mean that, you know, in the next probably 8 years here, that's kind of the timeline for the fourth turning ending, that we'll see a war in the United States? I can't predict that, but what I can tell you is that's the way it's ended every other time throughout American history.
And he said every time it was also marked by a weak leader. And in my opinion, if you guys are Democrats, that's your choice and all this, but I think Biden's the weakest leader we've ever had.
Yeah, and also...
It's a weak leader, then war. It's changing too fast.
Yeah.
It's changing too fast. Every time there's a reverse of the index changes, something bad happens. Well, the reason this is happening is because we're no longer a capitalist country.
Yeah.
A capitalist country lets the inefficient fail. They should fail.
That's right.
But the Fed and the Treasury bail out the incompetent.
Yeah.
And they kill, exactly as he talks about here, the S quadrant, the small business owner.
Yeah.
They crush them.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. And de Blasio came out, as you saw the other day, and made the mandates applicable to all businesses, not just those with 100 employees. So if you've got one employee, you're that small, very, very small business owner, and your employee doesn't want to get the medicine for whatever reason, you're out of business.
Yeah.
You're out of business. And that's
totalitarianism.
Yeah, and that leads to Marxism and the control corporatism, where the means of production is through these mega corporations that are controlled by the central planners, the global elite, whatever you want to call them.